All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of Brains Blog Roundtables. So, as our erstwhile co-founder, Gualtiero Piccinini, recently informed me, this year is the 20th anniversary of the Brains Blog. So, I thought we'd just have a little quick discussion with the editors of the Brains Blog. I'm now realizing I think it's pretty impressive that 20 years we've got just four people in the room as editors. So I thought we'd just have a little quick kind of nostalgic chat about the blog and how it came about and where it is and where it's going. So to do this today, I have all of the previous and current managing editors of the Brains blog. So we have the founder of the Brains blog and original uh, managing editor of the Brains blog, Gualtiero Piccinini, who's a professor at the University of Missouri, currently in Columbia. We have John Schwenkler, who took over from Gualtiero after that, who's a professor at University of Illinois. And then we have Nick Bird, who's my erstwhile co-manager until he found more exciting things to do, and is currently at Geisinger Health Systems. So we're just going to kind of have a little bit of an open chat about the blog and yeah, reminisce a little bit about the blog and where it's been. Okay, so I thought we'd just kind of start out with a chat about when each of us kind of took over managing the blog, kind of what the philosophy blog space was like, what role we thought the blog was playing, and how that kind of worked out. So obviously, Gualtiero, we want to start with you, since you started the blog. Kind of what were things like in the midst of the mid aughts when you started this thing?
It was 2005, and I was starting still. I was a postdoc at Washington University in St. Louis, and people were starting blogs in all areas, including philosophy. I thought, okay, maybe this is a way to like spread what I think are good ideas and good content. And so I started it, and then and eventually it started growing, in followers and interest. And I'm pretty sure it was Dan Ryder, who's a very good philosopher who unfortunately passed away last year. He was at UBC, I think, um, and I didn't know him that well, but he must have been following the blog, and he contacted me and said, "Why don't you turn it into a group blog? There's no group blog in the philosophy of mind and the sciences of the mind." And I thought, okay, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So then I turned it into a group blog, and I don't remember exactly when that happened, but it must have been, maybe a couple years in. Um, and it just started, telling people on the blog and anywhere else that I could think of, if you want to blog, join us. And so there was, a growing list of contributors. But eventually I got into a complicated divorce and I became department chair, and I thought, I don't have time for this anymore. I just have too much else going on. And so I thought, who could take it over? And I noticed that John, who had become one of the contributors, was not only active, but he had won an award for something that got posted on the blog. And I thought, okay, he seems like a good guy. He's engaged. He's doing it already. I just asked him, would you like to be the next editor? So then he did.
Yeah, I think I know that when I started, I think I was still teaching at Mount St. Mary's tiny liberal arts college in Maryland, and kind of finding where I was professionally. Probably it wasn't long before I moved to Florida State. But my sense had been for a while that, and maybe Gualtiero, you have a different impression or want to correct this, but that the initial success of blogging in philosophy had started to take a downturn, and maybe the initial kind of energy and excitement around this medium had passed. And for a while I have had the sense that it's actually very hard to get philosophers to blog about philosophy. We will blog about issues in the profession, and we'll go under pseudonyms or under our real names to talk about issues in the profession. But I don't know if there are like deep reasons having to do with the way philosophers do their work and kind of care and revision and so on, or if it's just kind of contingent sociological reasons. But I have found that except in it seems to me like except in particular cases where things congeal in the right way, like there's a lot of energy around this new project, getting philosophers consistently to kind of produce content and engage with content in the blog format is a very difficult thing to do. So my response to that was to build out um, different kinds of initiatives that didn't revolve around people going on the blog to kind of try out ideas, or maybe worse, like promote their work. That's, I think, the more that the blog devolves into a here I am promoting my work, the less maybe successful it is, because you're not really interested in the feedback, you're just interested in the clicks. And so we started running journal symposia. I think the first one of those that I did was with Mind and Language, and Sam Gutenplan was still there as an editor and was wonderful in helping to work out how to do it. And they would ungate the articles for the symposia, and then we built those out to a few different journals. And it seemed to me like that that was a way to um, there were different incentives for people to want to get involved. The author of the article is going to be happy to have the attention being drawn to their article. The commentators are getting attention drawn to them and maybe commenting on something by someone that they respect and admire. And so it gave a different set of kind of structures and incentives. But the one upshot of that is that kind of blogging as it originally was conceived, which was this way of like, you kind of have an idea and you try it out, and you get these fast responses to it, I think faded as a main thing that the blog was doing, and it became almost more of a magazine, or almost more of a journal, or kind of an appendage to journals than it had been before. The other thing that we tried doing, that Nick and I did when he was a graduate student at Florida State and I was on the faculty there, was the Minds Online conference, which we ran for a couple of years. But that too was such a, it's a very difficult thing, and this was long pre-COVID. But it was, and I think remains, a difficult thing to get philosophers to meaningfully participate in this kind of conference. So similar to Galtiero, I think I had done this for about maybe close to 10 years, maybe a little bit less than 10 years, and I started looking around and saying who's eager and established and foolish enough to take this on. And so Dan and Nick were the obvious people to ask.
Yeah, Nick, you want to add anything?
I was just going to say when I was between undergrad and grad school, it took me a while to get into graduate programs in philosophy, and it was group blogs like Brains that kind of kept me connected to what's happening in philosophy. Like reading the papers that came out just felt kind of stale, and I don't know, like there was no conversation, right? And so and I didn't have the money to like go to an APA or something like that. And so I thought, how can I stay connected? And so for me, at least, that was crucial to being able to like feel the pulse of philosophy while I didn't have access to a philosophy department for years. And there's other blogs that were doing it, but my interest really drew me to Brains. And then when I heard about the opportunity to do a conference online for the same reasons that I was thinking back as between undergrad and grad, I thought, oh, this would be great for those people who can't really make it to the APA or whatever the cognitive science version of the APA is, because they can access this and have conversations with people. And it means that people from other countries who maybe have other difficulties getting here can like get some FaceTime and some interaction. And so that was really exciting for me in terms of like an open access approach to like the conversations in philosophy that otherwise you have to like go to rooms and hotels in New York City or other places in the country to access.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of a forerunner to all the online conferences we're seeing now. Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, I think it really is that it's that kind of access, right? Like, so, I mean, it's getting better with open access now, but so much of academia is behind a paywall and like cloistered in these little groups of people who meet at, the APA or the SPP or wherever. So, I mean, I kind of think of it as, um, yeah, just opening that world up in a way, in a more public facing venue. But I think that's interesting, John, like, and Gualtiero, the way you put it, like starting out from a more traditional blog, like try out ideas format, it really has shifted towards a more professional venue kind of thing. And you know, for good and ill, probably there's I think a little bit less like free form conversation on the blog these days. And like that's one thing we might want to think about, like trying to reincorporate in certain ways into the blog. On the other hand, like it is this kind of like window, I think that everyone can access into what's going on in the profession. Um, and one thing we have really kept doing, John, as you mentioned, is the dialogue commentary format kind of thing, right? So it's not just one person; it's an exchange between scholars who are all working in the area. That's really become, I think, a core format for us, you know, since Nick and I took over. Um, the other thing that's, you know, different, you know, in Nick's and my time, and now my time is just the variety of content, right? Um, so moving from just text to now multi-format things. So we've started having videos like this. We've got a really interesting set of videos on AI and agency that our associate editor Majid Beni is doing, where we've started a podcast thread and we're starting to think about moving into other kinds of formats and stuff. So yeah, it's just really interesting to think about the evolution from you know, Gualtiero in a room as a postdoc to this big institution now with all these kind of different things going on. So, but yeah, I mean, it's also interesting thinking like what should this be going forward? You know, I think it's fair to say the evolution has been pretty organic so far. Um, and yeah, it's interesting to think about what kind of the future holds. So, yeah, good. Anyone want to add anything on that? We've got a couple more quick topics to go over. Um, Yeah, so I mean, we already talked about this a little bit, like with the, you know, like instituting the group blog structure and uh, the online conferences and so forth. I want to just ask if there are any like particular events that you were either proud of or funny stories or anything. I can start actually. So um, a couple years ago, we started these video roundtables, and I have no experience as an interviewer. Obviously I'm a very magnetic personality, but like I have no experience with like, you know, public content. So I was so worried about the format of this thing that I kind of almost accidentally put together the first roundtable with three of like the major people in one of the fields that I work in. So Ned Block, Susanna Siegel, and Susanna Schellenberg, we talked about perceptual representation. And I was so worried about like the format and getting everything working that like I got in there and I was like, oh man, I really should not appear like an idiot in this video because like these are people who I want to like know my work and so forth. So yeah, there's been a lot of little moments like that where like the editorship side of it and the content side of it kind of interact in an interesting way. So anyway, that's the story I thought of. I don't know if anyone has anything else they want to share like that. Yeah,
I
go
have a
through.
fun fact. I mentioned that Dan Ryder was the one who suggested to turn it into a group blog. And this is not a criticism of him, but he actually never blogged on Brains or anywhere else that I know of. At least he didn't contribute to Brains, even though it was his idea. I expected that he wanted to contribute, but he didn't.
I think I have a couple stories that I couldn't tell because of people involved. I mean, the one of the amazing things about editing it, you get this all the time as or you get this occasionally as a philosopher anyway, but is the I'm sure you all have the experience of people reaching out to you with their theory of everything. You
Oh,
know,
sure. Yeah.
the theory of consciousness and quantum mechanics and the origin of the universe that you get sent to you with an invitation to publish it is um, always a good experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Nick, anything?
One thing I was kind of impressed by is when we pitched like a video series to some Templeton people, the summer seminar in philosophy and neuroscience at Duke. there was actually quite a lot of excitement to throw some money at like developing videos that are a bit more like well produced, so to speak.
Yeah.
And some student editors at Florida State like did some animations, and then some various scholars put together like a 4-part slide deck type situation. And honestly, I just learned a ton about like what it's like to produce video at a higher
Yeah.
level than like recording Zoom and then throwing it on YouTube. Um, and so I'm not like super proud of the exact quality of the results, but it was like a very interesting experience. And the fact that people wanted to put money into this was
Yeah.
eye-opening to me, at least, because, before then it was just like us basically paying for hosting, and it felt reassuring that like people think there's enough value here to actually put money into it.
Yeah, I mean it's a great point. And that's led to some more things. So we did this series of videos, kind of like tutorial videos last year in partnership with the Neural Mechanisms Online organization on philosophy of neuroscience, kind of introductory concepts, which I thought was really great. The uh, the interesting thing about that is that like it really does take more than just a person in a room to do this kind of multi-format content, right? So one nice thing is that we've now started partnering with Neural Mechanisms Online with uh, the new Society for Philosophy and Neuroscience, with the Society for Philosophy and Psychology, and so on and so forth. So there's also like a kind of broadening of involvement, and in a way, Gualtiero, that's a continuation of the making it a group thing, right? Like it's not just us, right?
Yeah, and on that point, I am very grateful to you guys for what you have turned the blog into, because it does even more than I ever dreamed of, and I do think it plays a very valuable role in the profession and in the community, because it connects people within the profession in all kinds of ways, like with all these partnerships, for example. And it also is public, so anybody can look at it and say, "Oh, okay, this is what's going on in the philosophy in this area." Um, I myself have benefited tremendously from the blog, because I've met people, I've started collaborations with people that I would have never known if it hadn't been for the blog. So I imagine other people have stories like that. So um, even the Minds Online conference, I'm sure, was part of the inspiration for me for eventually co-founding the International Society for the Philosophy of the Sciences of the Mind, which I hope it continues. Now it's like a big yearly online conference. Um, so that was another like really, I think, groundbreaking, pioneering effort that is connected to the Brains blog.
Real quick, I just want to say credit to Richard Brown for the like online consciousness conferences that I think
Yeah.
I learned a lot about when I was doing some research about online conferencing and philosophy. It goes back to roughly the time of Brains, like 2006-ish. And so, there are people whose shoulders we're standing on even with the online conferencing stuff.
Yeah, great. I mean, this kind of gets into, I guess, like kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is just kind of like the the state of kind of public philosophy and where the blog fits within it. I mean, this is something I actually think about a lot as current managing editor. The one of the things I've noticed is that just like the world has expanded in this sphere, right? Like I feel like every day I learn about a new philosophy podcast or something that I didn't know about before, and like it's like, oh, now my list of podcasts I need to listen to is even longer. But yeah, I mean, interestingly, I think the place things have kind of grown into is this kind of like semi-formal, I don't want to say formal, but like very curated public-facing content, in a way that maybe there are other places that do it, but I don't know of that many. So it's not purely public philosophy, right? It's supposed to be an academic exchange, but hopefully it's like uh, curated and digestible enough where um, the people who are not actively in the field can follow it. My attempt to keep every post to 1,000 words is an ongoing struggle. Gualtieri, you're one of the recent actually flouters of this. of this rule. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know, like, and you know, I was happy to hear you say, Walter, that you see the blog doing a lot of different things because like every day I'm like, oh man, we could be doing more in this direction or in this direction or in this direction. So yeah, I don't know. Any just kind of thoughts about where public philosophy is or where it's going?
I mean, I guess the one thing I think is that the there's a question about, or one of the difficulties is um the lack of institutional support of the kind that's needed to produce what increasingly feels like it needs to be a professional looking product, right? So I think that's what
Yeah,
we've discussed, that like in the early days it was just a blog. It was just, hosted on Blogger or something, and people would post things, and the shift of it to more of a, multimedia web magazine, podcast, video, and so on. Those kinds of things are, I mean, I remember the amount of time I spent, moving over to WordPress and doing a domain change and so on.
yeah,
Uh, the those things are time intensive and in various ways costly, and you're competing with these very polished products.
yeah,
And so, one of the things like Nick's describing, this Templeton grant, of course, we could always use more money. But I feel like, institutional prerogatives, which are largely on the side of, producing research and teaching students, for all that's said about we like public philosophy, the desire is that we do that, kind of on your own time and definitely on someone else's dime.
yeah. Yeah, just agree. You know, one of the major challenges we face is that all the time put into the Brains blog is volunteered, right? So you know, it's easy to put on your CV and say, okay, like I get some professional credit, and Gautier are absolutely correct about all the connections, all the great things about that. But yeah, it does just kind of become more and more time consuming as the format changes. So yeah, anyone listening who's got some cash they want to throw in the direction of the Brains blog, you know, maybe I'll get a place besides my bike room slash office slash music room where I can I can do some of these interviews. But yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think like as things evolve, it's just going to be uh, more and more kind of complicated to like keep this all going. One nice thing about like the centralized managing editor is like there is like a bit of a course, right? So I always think there's this great kind of democratization about it where we can get a lot of different people to contribute to the blog, and sort of the content generation is very distributed, but also like there's a little bit of uh, hand at the rudder. Even as loose and disorganized a hand as I happen to be. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's all important stuff to think about going forward.
Keep it going.
Sure, I'm trying. Cool. All right. Any last things anyone wants to kind of add in? I want to thank you all for doing this. I didn't want to I didn't want the 20th anniversary to go unmarked. So just a small little thing for anyone who wants to know a little bit about the history of the blog. Uh, okay, great. Well, maybe that's a good place to end on. I want to thank everyone, Gualtiero, John, and Nick for joining us today. I hope this is a nice little treat for longtime consumers of the Brains blog. And yeah, we'll be back to more content this week and going into next year. So thanks everyone, and hope
Thank
to
you.
see you all soon on the blog. Thanks you all. We'll talk soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
All right.
Thanks.